Hi there, welcome to this video lesson, which is about the AP Lang exam. I just want to make sure my yep, everything seems to be in good working order. All right, so I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to spend some time right now telling you a little bit about what you can expect regarding the AP Lang exam. I know a lot of you have questions about this, a lot of you have asked questions about this, and I know there are things you're wondering. The one thing I will say is this is not going to be a short video, and I apologize for that. Feel free to watch me on a faster speed or listen to this listen to this screencast while you work out or cook dinner or something like that. There's not a lot visually going on in here. I have like bullet points, but it's actually a very dull looking PowerPoint. So um, as we get to the end, you'll want to pay very close attention when I start talking specifically about the pretest feedback and what that means, because I am going to ask you to do an exit ticket activity after you're done watching this to just sort of indicate that you have watched it and that you understand some of the more important points. So this screencast, I'm going to talk a little bit about the setup of the AP exam, how it's scored. I'm going to show you some data, talk a little bit about test prep, and then I'll talk a little bit about the pretest feedback that I'm going to give you. All right, so the AP exam setup is two sections. The first section is multiple choice, and there's an hour given for that. It consists of 5 passages, 45 questions, which is a little bit longer than the pretest you just took. That one was 40 questions in 4 passages. Half of them are analytical and half are revision focused, which we'll talk about more in a second. The other half of the exam, I should say 2/3 of the exam, is the free response questions. And that section of the exam is 2 hours and 15 minutes. Normally they're handwritten. Last year they were typed, and to be honest, I'm not sure what this year's going to look like. I'm going to see if anybody has made any statements about that. I think they might be typed again this year. I know they're going to be doing them in school, like a regular exam administration, but they might be done online. I'm not sure about that. You'll have to write 3 essays during that 2 hours and 15 minutes. I'll tell you a little bit more about the 3 types here in a second. Basically, if you take 2 hours and you divide it 3 ways, it's 40 minutes each per essay. So when we write them in isolation, that's usually how much time we'll take for it. However, they do actually give you 15 minutes extra for reading time. A couple of the tasks do involve you reading some materials, so they give you actually 2 hours and 15 minutes. By the time it gets sort of calculated, the multiple choice is worth 45% of the overall score, and the essays all calculated together are worth 55%. So you can see the essays are weighted a little bit more heavily, which makes sense because it's a composition course. So to go into a little bit more detail, the multiple choice section of the exam, the passages that you're going to get are generally ones you're unfamiliar with. They're not going to be things that you should know. There's no particular pieces of writing I'm supposed to share with you because they'll be on the test. These are cold reads. They're all going to be nonfiction. They could be from any time period from 1600 to the present. Usually you can count on the fact that there will be one of them that is sort of more archaic in its language. There'll be varying degrees of difficulty. They could be on any subject, philosophy, science, language, math, religion, you name it. You could get a passage on it, which is kind of what I like about this, is that you never know what you're going to get. Of the 45 questions that you're being given, 23 to 25 of them are reading questions. And you had some of these on your pretest. They give you a passage and they ask you questions analyzing the passage. Usually they're going to refer to specific places in the passage. They'll ask you about the author's choices. The questions, as you might have noticed, are focusing on the purpose of the piece and the strategies that the authors use to achieve that purpose. Then 20 to 22 of them are writing questions. These are fairly new. Last year was the first year we were supposed to have them, but then of course we didn't. So those are writing questions, and what they do is ask you to revise a given passage for clarity and purpose. And you saw some of those on your pretest too. The first essay, Q1, is a synthesis essay. And I just realized that my little thing up there is in the way. So what a synthesis essay does is it's going to give you 5 to 7 short sources on a given subject. It's going to give you the prompt, it's going to tell you what question you're trying to ask, and then it's going to tell you to read these sources. That's what the 15 minutes are for, by the way, because they know that giving you this many reading this much reading material is going to require you to have a little bit of extra time. So the prompt for this essay is going to be argumentative or expository, and you have to answer the question using those sources to inform your point on the subject. But like, the point of synthesis isn't just to use the sources. Like it's kind of like a DBQ, and when we study synthesis, which won't be until probably like February, March, we'll talk about the differences. But the goal of a synthesis is to actually interact with the sources, but root the response in your own argument. The second essay, Q2, is what we'd call rhetorical analysis. And what this one's going to do is present you with a passage of nonfiction about a page long. And then your response is going to explain how the author used specific rhetorical moves to achieve their purpose. And so that is probably the hardest question on the exam. Last year, that was the only question on the exam. It's definitely the one that students, both across the board and at Nazareth, have the hardest time with. It's a high-level thinking skill. And I can give you strategies and show you examples, but ultimately, it's tough, right? The third question, Q3, is the argument. And what this one's going to do is ask you to take a position on a topic. They're open-ended, so you need to come up with the examples, evidence, and reasoning right from the top of your own head. It's not based on any sort of sources or anything like that. A lot of times these are philosophical, and they're usually not topics you've studied or thought about. So they're not going to ask heavy-hitting, deeply polarized arguments that you've had. They're not going to ask about policy or anything like that. They're going to ask about more sort of philosophically based topics. The thing about all three of these essay types is we will get to know them in great detail throughout the course of the year. As of right now, this is just meant to be an overview, but when we learn about AP argument prompts, we'll actually look at examples of former prompts. We'll look at student samples. You'll try to write them. So by the time we get to the exam in May, you're going to know exactly what each of these prompts looks like because you will have done so many of them by that point. All right. So moving on, how scores are calculated. So as I mentioned, the multiple choice section changed slightly in the 1920 year, and so did the rubric. We added those writing questions, and the rubric it used to be a 1 through 9 score, and now it's a 1 through 6 on each essay. But then, of course, COVID happened, and then so the 2020 exam that actually got taken by kids last spring was not the full thing. As I said, they only did one essay, and it was a rhetorical analysis essay. So last year was supposed to be the first year sort of scoring with this new format and these new guidelines, and then it didn't happen. So the exact way you can get a given score is still really kind of hazy. They use all kinds of algorithms to achieve cut scores and that kind of thing. And all of that is well beyond my little English teacher brain. But basically what happens is that your multiple choice percentage and the score you get on each of the 3 essays get put into an equation. And then From that equation, it gives you a composite score, and then that composite score is sort of cut at certain places to designate the overall exam score, which is the 1 through 5, which you are probably familiar with. In the past, 55 to 60% on the multiple choice, plus all sort of adequate essays, not amazing essays, but adequate. That's what it would take to get you a 3. And while we don't have sort of the data to back it up at that point, I think it's still safe to say that we're going to be in the same range now. The one thing that I want you to understand about AP exam scores is there is no such thing as passing an AP exam or failing an AP exam. I know that you hear those words thrown around, and I'll be honest, I've tried to train myself not to use them, but sometimes I will say, oh, they passed the exam, and that's really false language. Because the goal of an AP exam isn't to pass or fail you. It's to assess how qualified you are on college work. Basically, it's looking at, as of now in 11th grade, how qualified are you to be doing college work? Are you meeting the expectations of college work 2 years early? And so students earning a 5 are designated as extremely well qualified. Students earning a 4 are designated as well qualified. 3 is qualified. Now, typically, what determines whether or not you get college credit for it, usually the baseline is a 3. That's sort of bare minimum. It would be kind of the equivalent of saying, okay, this kid would have earned a C in a college course on this subject, which, since you're doing it 2 years early, that's pretty good. But it all depends on what score your particular college is going to accept. Some of them will say, okay, yeah, 3 qualified, we will let you skip freshman English. Others will say, no, we want you to have a 4 or a 5 in order to let you skip it. Other colleges will say, great, we're glad that you took it, we're glad that you did well on it, but we still want you to take our freshman English class, we'll let you have elective credit. So different colleges use those numbers in different ways, which is why it's really hard to say that one thing is passing or failing. The other thing is that earning a 1 or a 2 on the AP exam does not make you look bad. If a college gets your transcript and it has on there that you earned a 2 on the AP exam, that does not tell the college, ooh, we don't want that person at our school. You just decided to try to take a test assessing knowledge 2 years ahead of where you are. If a college sees that you earned a 2, they're going to say, wow, this kid took a chance and they're doing pretty good for an 11th grader. So the goal of the AP exam is different from other standardized tests. So like, think of like the Keystones or the PSSAs or whatever. The goal on those is to get as many people as possible achieving proficient or advanced. Like, that's the goal. We want everybody to reach proficiency. The goal of the AP exam is not to get everybody earning a 3 or higher. The purpose of it is to sort. It's basically to give you a shot and say, okay, so based on this evidence, here is where you are. And so if you don't earn a qualifying score, if you earn a 2 or a 1, it doesn't mean that you failed. It just means that you're not already meeting those college standards 2 years early. And not everybody can meet those college standards 2 years early. Not everybody's supposed to. The thing that you guys are biting off here is a very large piece. And so there's no shame in not quite being there just yet. So what readers are looking for when they look at your essays. So your AP exam essays are scored by thousands of readers. That's what they're called. And they're made up of AP line teachers and college professors from all over the world. They receive extensive training before they get to score your essays. And I know this because I have been one of them since 2013. I've scored thousands of essays each year. Usually we do it live. Last year we did it online from my couch. And I hear that that's how we're probably doing it again this year. but it's a really amazing experience because it gives me the opportunity to know, like, okay, well, yeah, what are they looking for? And so as we go through the different essays, I obviously, as you practice them and write them and we look at student samples and you do your own, I can give you more specifics. But overall, what they're looking for is, do you have a clear thesis? Do you have a clear line of reasoning? Like, can you explain why you're making that claim? Are you using specific and appropriate evidence? Are you developing your ideas? And the overall quality of the writing. And I include that overall quality of writing because students will often ask, oh, does spelling count? Does grammar count? That kind of thing. And the short answer is yes, but not in the way you think. It's not like we count errors and take off points for them. We're looking for clarity. Does this make sense? What kind of grasp does this student have on the English language? Are they writing sort of average, adequate level work? Are they like way up here writing really incredible prose, or are they struggling to make a coherent sentence? That's really what we're looking for. We are not nitpicky at all. We read the essays very quickly, and we give it a score on the rubric. But I have this last bullet point highlighted because this is sort of the overall philosophy of the AP reading, and that is reward students for what they do well. We want to be able to give you what you've earned. We want to look for things where you're doing it right. We're not looking to nitpick and dock you for things. That's totally not the philosophy. And that's kind of hard for students to wrap their head around. That being said, we want to make sure we score you fairly, because if we score you higher than you are actually showing us, then we're doing you a disservice. That's what I always think of when I read. I say, can this kid be successful if they skip freshman English in college? And if I'm kind of on the fence and I'm like, no, they really need to take freshman English. And that's okay. Like, that's good. I have to give them that score so they get what they need. So some data, people have asked me, like, how do Nazareth students tend to do on the AP Lang exam? And overall, we tend to do very well. I just pulled data from the last 5 years. For being an English person, I'm actually a very big data nerd, and especially when it comes to my students and their AP work. But you can see over the past 5 years, the global average is always a little bit below qualifying. And you can see that we here in Nazareth are consistently above the global average. Now you'll see we're varying degrees above the global average, right? So these 2 years we were quite a bit ahead of the global average. Last year we were just a little bit ahead. Last year's scores, I think, are a little bit of an anomaly because of the way the test worked out and only being one question, etc. But we have consistently, this is the percentage of our students here at Nazareth earning a 3 or higher. And you can see that we tend to do pretty well, and some years are better than others. Certainly, I would be happier, we would all be happier if we were more up here consistently every year. But some years just were a little bit lower than that. But overall, we do very, very well, and that's something to definitely be proud of. One thing I will say is we as a school tend to do better on multiple choice than the essays, which is kind of surprising to a lot of people. But it's true, and I think that's one of the reasons that we weren't quite as far away from the average last year, because we did not have a multiple choice section, and that is an opportunity that I find that my students really shine on. And you know what's crazy is we don't do as much in terms of practicing multiple choice because we tend to do really well on it. We struggle more with the essays, and so it's better for us to spend our time together working on essay skills and writing and practicing that, because that's where we have the most room to grow, and that's what we need. So just a little bit of data. Um, Students will often ask me about test prep. So the thing about this test is there's nothing to study, right? All you can do for this test is just practice. I have some Quizlet sets of terminology, but none of them are, it's not very specialized terminology. It's very much just kind of English type words. So there's nothing to cram. There's no reason to make thousands of flashcards because that's not going to help you. The other thing is that test prep books, ones made by Cliff's Notes or Princeton Review or something like that, are really, I have found to be terrible items. They, first of all, will often provide you with lists of terminology of like rhetorical devices and whatnot, which you don't need to know, that it's not on the test. It used to be 15 years ago, and the test prep books haven't caught up. The test prep books also tend to include multiple choice practice, which is kind of nice because it gives you the opportunity to sort of build those timing skills and read tough passages. But the problem is that those questions that are in those test prep books are not up to the standards of the ones that actually make it on the AP exam. And because they're not written by the people who are making the tests. The people who write the test prep books are publishers, and they're not going to be to the same standards of reliability and validity, because the ones that actually make it on the exam are tested hardcore to make sure they're fair, and they're tweaked if necessary. So I find that questions in test prep books, if you want to use them for timing, they can be okay, but if you're going to take a practice test and then be like, well, I don't understand why this is the right answer that they're saying is the right answer, I don't understand why I got it wrong, a lot of times I would agree with you. I will say that's not a good question. And so I don't recommend any test prep books for you to purchase. I will instead suggest to always use the College Board resources. If you want to practice multiple choice, go straight to the source. I have tons of old exams that include, actual College Board written questions, and AP Classroom, which we can use to do some multiple choice practice. There is a book coming out, and I don't know if I would call it a textbook or a test prep book. I think it's a little bit of both. It's being published by a company called Perfection Learning, and I've pre-ordered a copy of it, but it hasn't come yet, which is why I can't tell you exactly what it's going to be look like or used for. But this book was written by some acquaintances and friends of mine who know what they're talking about. One of the gentlemen who co-wrote it actually used to be the head of AP English for the College Board. And he was involved in this whole course redesign and the curriculum guide and all that. So they do have this book coming out. I've pre-ordered it. I don't know when it's going to arrive. I'm getting a little impatient. But that book, we might be getting it as a school, or I may be able to recommend it to you as a like, hey, try to get this one for good test prep opportunities on your own. But I don't want to make that recommendation until I actually have a copy of it and I can preview it myself. So far, I've only seen the first chapter. Okay. All right, so on to the last section of this PowerPoint, which has to do with the pretest that you took last week. So what I am going to ask you to do at the end of this, I'm going to ask you to show that you've watched and understood this information before I give you your feedback form. Normally I do this in person and I make sure that I've explained it really thoroughly. But since you're getting this feedback on your own, I want to make sure that you're processing some really important things about the why and the how. So just to recap, why did we do it? I wanted you to have an idea of what the multiple choice section looks like, and it gives me information about where you are, like legitimate, I know you did this and I can see this is how you did. It is just a multiple choice section, but statistically, your multiple choice performance tends to correlate with your writing skills. People are not generally going to bomb the multiple choice and be amazing writers. or vice versa. You tend to, their language skills, and they're gonna match up pretty well. So the multiple choice section alone gives me a pretty good idea. I also mentioned that we're gonna take this same test, this multiple choice section, in April, and then we'll get to see how much you've grown from pre-test to post-test. Now, why I'm giving you the information that I'm giving you. It's giving you an indication of your abilities, sort of where you stand. It's giving you an idea of how hard you might find the work in the course. It gives you an idea of how much test prep you might want to do. But mostly, I want you to have this information because I want you to have realistic expectations of your abilities and your possibilities. I am not, and I'm going to say this very, very clearly, I do not use this pretest for gatekeeping. So if I find a student who has not done well on the pretest and all indications are saying, ooh, you know what, they're going to really struggle with this, they're probably not going to pass the exam, I do not sit here and say, ooh, this kid shouldn't be an AP Lang, because that's not the case. Even if all of this data shows that you're going to struggle, you should still be here. If you want to be here and you want to do the work and you want to grow and you can have realistic expectations about your abilities and your potential success, I am happy to have you. I don't want you to think that I'm looking at this data and then I'm gonna look at you differently because of it. This is for informational purposes, and I want to make sure that we're as clear as possible. Right? So when you get your pretest feedback, there's a couple different parts of it. The first part is going to look like this. It's going to say, in order to earn a qualifying score on the AP exam, according to the traditional calculations, which may change with the new exam format, you need approximately a 55% on the multiple choice, along with 3 adequate essay scores. And then I'm going to tell you that your pretest raw score was X%. Right. Keep in mind, if you didn't finish the pretest, there were a couple people who left some questions blank. You may actually have a better understanding of the content than what this score is showing. But, you know, in that case, you know, okay, I have to work on my timing. I have to learn to work a little faster. And that can be good information to have. So at this point, I'm going to say, if your raw score on this pretest is 60% or above, you're in good shape. Like, I'm thinking, yeah, excellent, because students tend to improve between 10 and 15% from pretest to post-test, kind of naturally over the course of the year. So if what you see on your form is 60% or above, I am like cheering for you. I'm saying, yeah, we're in good shape. At this point, if your pretest raw score was between 45 and 59, I'm not too concerned about you at this point. You're within what I call the growth zone. You can reasonably improve that pretest score, that multiple choice score between now and the exam by that much, which would put you in the range. And by the way, I'm using 60% as the range because we're not sure if the calculation will change. So I'm going a little bit higher than this traditional 55. If you're below 45 on the pretest, I might have more concerns. And those concerns may be that you're probably going to find the work to be difficult. And you may not get your multiple choice score up to where it needs to be to earn the qualifying score. You are going to grow. I have all of these stories of students who take the pretest and get like a 25% or a 35%. And inevitably, those are the students who grow like 30% over the course of the year, which is amazing. You know, that growth is super important. So this is one piece of information that you're going to see on the form. Second piece of information comes to me from the state of Pennsylvania. And so what they do is they collect data from your PSSAs, your Keystones, your CDT. If you've taken the PSAT, they may pull that. And based on all of this data they have on you, which is quite frankly kind of creepy. The school then gets information about your potential for success in various AP courses. And so what I'm doing in this section is I'm just plugging it in. According to this information, you have this percent chance of earning a qualifying score on the AP Lang exam. And this comes from the state of Pennsylvania. This number I had nothing to do with. I'm just reporting it. And I found these to be pretty accurate, but we have to remember they're only projections. They're only likelihoods. So I've looked at data from previous years, and I found, for example, so I have a group of students that have an 80% or higher projection. This is saying, yeah, you are 80% probable to earn a qualifying score on the exam. And of that group of students, 93% of them did indeed earn that qualifying score, but not all of them. So having a high projection does not guarantee you success. I had a student one time who had a 90-some% probability of qualifying, and she got a 2, right? So they're not set in stone, they're just informational. Among a group of students whose projection was between 50 and 79%, 2/3 of them, about 66%, did indeed earn that qualifying score, but 33% didn't, which makes sense, right? If you have a 60% chance, that means there's a 40% chance that you won't. Among students with a lower than 49% likelihood, so people who have lower than that probability, only one of them earned a qualifying score. And I used the raw number there instead of a percentage, because the percentage would be skewed because of the lower number of students involved. So you can see that students who have a lower probability of success, they did indeed have less success. And so it all kind of goes along with the data, but that is how I have found that those numbers kind of shake out. So based on this piece of information and this piece of information, I come to a predicted conclusion for you. This is just based on numbers, right? It's not anything personal. I don't want you to be offended by what I've told you. I'm just looking at the data, and I'm trying to kind of put it all together. I use the raw data. Sometimes I don't have it all, so I might not have this for you. If you weren't at Nazareth last year, or if you, for whatever reason, didn't take your Keystone, I might not have this information, and that means I only have one thing to go off of, which means that my ability to make a judgment is a little bit harder. Also, if this is super high, but this is kind of low, I become less confident, because then I say, okay, this is a little bit inconclusive, or or vice versa. But I try to check off one of these conclusions for you. So conclusion 1, I might say you're a strong candidate for success on the AP exam. But I always point out that scores and raw ability are impacted by work ethic and attitude as you go through the class. And what I don't want to happen is I don't want you to get overconfident. Right? That can hamper the growth that is needed to earn higher than the minimum qualifying score. And anything you can do to go above and beyond is going to maximize your growth. In this case, I would say, based on the data, you're likely to earn a 3, but you can potentially earn a 4 or a 5 if you approach the course with enthusiasm, a good attitude, and a good work ethic. Conclusion 2. I would say you have a reasonable expectation for success. You have a lot of potential for growth, and you should expect to find the coursework reasonably challenging. Your growth, however, is always going to be dependent on your work ethic and attitude, and going above and beyond is going to help. In this case, I would say you're capable of earning a 3. That doesn't mean you're guaranteed, but you're capable of it, and you have some potential to earn the higher scores. Conclusion 3 is that you might find success on the AP exam. You're probably going to find the course rather difficult. You should be prepared to have a realistic expectation of your abilities, an enthusiastic approach to learning, and an excellent work ethic. You've got room for improvement, and that's going to be dependent on your work ethic and your attitude. And if I've checked you off in this description, you may earn a 2 or a 3. You can kind of go either way. Conclusion 4, again, based on the data that I have, I can say you're unlikely to earn a qualifying score on the exam. You're going to find the course challenging. However, and this is really important and it's different from all the others, the course is valuable, even to students who choose not to take the test or students who do take the test but don't earn a qualifying score. As long as you're willing to work hard, engage with the material, you are going to grow. And you're going to go to college being a stronger reader and writer, which is the most important thing for any of us. Okay. Remember, this was in the syllabus, but remember that your course grade does not necessarily correlate to your exam score. Just because you have an A or B in our class doesn't mean you're going to earn a 4 or 5 on the test. A student could do well in the class, but not earn a qualifying score. The exam is one test on one day. It's testing a very specific skill set in a very high stress situation. Your course grade, on the other hand, is a culmination of a lot of different assessments over the course of 10 months, including material and learning opportunities that go beyond this narrow scope of the test. So I want you to keep your pretest and your projections in mind, which is why I'm giving them to you. I don't want you to focus just on your grade in the course, but I also don't want you to just focus on that data because they're two kind of very different things. And that is the end of the slideshow after, what was it, like 40 minutes? And what you should do now, first of all, thank you for listening. I appreciate you sticking with me through this very long explanation. You can now proceed to the exit ticket assignment. And once you submit that, I will go ahead and put your pretest feedback sheet into your shared returned work folder. Okay. Thank you very much.